I never thought I'd be the kind of person who posts something like this online. Honestly, I've always been the type to keep my problems to myself, believing that sharing them would just make me look weak. But after everything that happened, I realized that staying silent was only letting people take advantage, and maybe writing this down is the only way I can make sense of it all. My name is Emma, I'm 26, and I've spent most of my life trying to be good. I come from a small close-knit family. My parents worked hard to give me, and my younger brother, a stable life. My mom used to tell me kindness isn't weakness, Emma, always do the right thing no matter what, and I tried to live by that. I've always been the girl who helped others, who said yes when everyone else said no, who smiled even when I felt broken inside. After college, I landed a mid-level position at a marketing firm in the city. The pay wasn't amazing, but it was enough to live independently, and I was learning fast. I worked long hours, often staying late just to finish a project or help a colleague meet a deadline. I genuinely thought that hard work and honesty would eventually pay off. At work there was Clara, someone I immediately considered a mentor. She was confident, brilliant, and had this natural ability to command attention in any room. She started guiding me, offering tips and praising my efforts in front of others. At first I trusted her completely. I thought she genuinely wanted me to succeed. She seemed like someone I could lean on when things got tough, someone who understood the struggles of being new in a competitive environment. Outside of work, my life wasn't as perfect. I'd been in a relationship for 3 years with someone who I thought understood me, but we were drifting apart. I was investing all my energy into my career, trying to secure a future where I felt in control. I didn't notice that my personal life was slowly falling apart, or maybe I chose not to. Things at work started changing slowly, almost imperceptibly. Meetings I was leading suddenly seemed to go unnoticed. Ideas I shared were brushed aside, only for someone else to present them later and take all the credit. At first I thought I was imagining it. After all, everyone makes mistakes, right? Or maybe I just wasn't assertive enough. Then came the first major red flag. I was assigned a crucial client project, my biggest opportunity yet. I spent weeks perfecting every slide, rehearsing every pitch, making sure every detail was flawless. I wanted to prove myself, to show that I was capable of handling bigger responsibilities. The day before the client presentation, Clara asked to go over my work to make some adjustments. I trusted her, after all, she was my mentor. I didn't realize then that what she was doing was far from innocent. By the time I got to the office the next morning, she had subtly rewritten parts of my presentation, added her own notes, and even removed slides I'd spent hours creating. I tried to bring it up, hesitating at first. I didn't want to look petty, but as soon as I questioned her, she laughed it off in front of the team, calling me overly sensitive and too inexperienced to understand strategy. My stomach sank. The humiliation stung more than I could put into words. I'd trusted her, believed in her, and now she had not only taken my work, but also made me look incompetent in front of everyone. That's when I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to see before. Clara wasn't just competitive, she thrived on manipulating people. She made herself look good by making others look small, and somehow I had become her favorite target. I went home that night exhausted, frustrated, and confused. I replayed the entire day in my mind, trying to figure out where I had gone wrong, but it wasn't me, it was her. And for the first time in my life, a small spark of anger flickered inside me, not just disappointment, not just hurt, but real burning anger. I didn't act on it immediately. I didn't yell, I didn't confront her. I just sat in my apartment staring at the walls, thinking about how carefully she had manipulated the situation. I realized that if I wanted justice, if I wanted her to understand the consequences of what she'd done, I couldn't react impulsively, I had to plan. Little did I know that night was the beginning of a long, complicated game, one where patience, strategy, and timing would be everything, and Clara had no idea she was about to meet someone who wouldn't be broken by betrayal, someone who was about to fight back in a way she would never see coming. Never underestimate the quiet ones, because sometimes the ones who seem the most innocent are the ones who will get the sweetest revenge. After that first humiliation, I thought maybe I was overreacting, maybe I had misunderstood Clara's intentions, but the more I looked back, the more I realized that nothing she had done was accidental. It wasn't just the presentation she had manipulated, it was everything, every little opportunity one had been given she found a way to twist in her favor. The next week, a project I had spent countless nights preparing was quietly reassigned to her without explanation, and when I asked about it, she smiled that same patronizing smile, and said it was better for me to focus on smaller tasks for now. That smile made my blood boil, but I nodded, keeping calm while my mind screamed that something had to be done. Then there were the whispers, the subtle comments from colleagues that I ignored at first. They would say things like, "Oh, I didn't know you were handling that, I thought Clara was leading it," or "She told me she finished it already, maybe you can help next time." Everyone assumed Clara was the one in charge, everyone except me. I tried to talk to my manager, but every time I brought up specifics, he would brush it off as miscommunication or inexperience. No one wanted to see what was really happening, and that realization hit me harder than any insult. I started noticing patterns. She had friends everywhere, strategically placed people who would support her claims without question, who would nod and smile while subtly undermining me in meetings. Every small victory I thought I had, she had already taken credit for it before I even spoke. It felt like a trap I couldn't escape, and the more I tried to prove myself, the tighter the noose became. My confidence started cracking, but anger replaced fear. Anger at how someone so manipulative could operate with almost no consequences, at how easily people believed her, at how unfair the world suddenly felt. Then came the betrayal that cut the deepest. I had been mentoring a new intern, showing her the ropes, sharing everything I knew, hoping to build a genuine friendship, and within a week, Clara had cornered the intern and completely rewrote my mentorship as her own work, even presenting a report the intern had drafted under my guidance as if it were her idea. I couldn't believe it. I sat in my desk staring at the screen, numb, realizing for the first time how calculated she was. She wasn't just competitive, she was predatory. She thrived on other people's trust, and she never let a good chance to humiliate slip by. I tried confronting her once, carefully, asking why she took over my projects, and why she presented my work as hers, expecting maybe an apology, or at least a conversation. She laughed in my face, leaned back in her chair, and said with that cold, perfect composure, "Emma, you really need to understand the difference between being helpful and being replaceable." That sentence burned through me, not just because of what it said, but because it revealed the truth I had been avoiding. I wasn't dealing with an overachiever or a colleague who made mistakes. I was dealing with someone who enjoyed breaking people down to make herself look stronger. That night, I stayed awake, replaying every interaction, trying to piece together how long she had been doing this, how many projects she had hijacked, how many opportunities she had stolen from me under the guise of mentorship. I remembered every compliment she ever gave me, every time she praised me in front of the team, and suddenly all of it felt like poison, like a mask she wore to make me trust her before she cut me down. I cried more than I want to admit, partly from frustration, partly from disbelief, and partly because I knew I had to be smarter than her to survive. I started documenting everything, keeping screenshots of emails, saving every draft and message that proved my work was mine, noting every time she twisted situations to her advantage. The more I collected, the more angry I became, but also more determined. I realized that if I didn't fight back, she would continue to manipulate everyone around her, and I couldn't let that happen, not just for me, but for every person she had ever used and discarded. I began to plan, but not recklessly. I observed her patterns, her habits, how she spoke, who she trusted, who she manipulated, and I started imagining a way to turn all that against her. It wasn't enough to confront her in anger. That would play right into her hands. I needed proof, I needed timing, I needed precision. And while I was building that plan, I watched as she celebrated small victories, unaware that the quiet, helpful, underestimated girl she had been crushing every day was slowly becoming something else, something patient, calculating, and more dangerous than she could imagine. By the end of that week, I realized this wasn't just about stolen projects or humiliating comments anymore. It was personal. Clara had underestimated me in every possible way, and for the first time in months, I felt in control, not because I had power, but because I had clarity. I knew exactly what I was up against, and I knew that her sense of security was fragile. And while she was laughing and winning the office politics game, I was preparing. I was no longer just Emma the quiet, helpful, naive employee. I was Emma who had seen the true face of betrayal, and was ready to turn the tables, carefully and completely, in a way she would never forget. After weeks of being undermined and humiliated, I realized that acting impulsively would only play into Clara's hands. She thrived on reactions, on seeing people lose their composure while she remained calm and untouchable, and I refused to give her that satisfaction. Instead, I retreated into silence, watching, observing, and taking notes. I started documenting every interaction, every project she tried to hijack, every little lie she whispered to our colleagues, every subtle attempt to make me look incompetent. I even saved old emails and drafts, piecing together a timeline of manipulation that, once compiled, was undeniable. The more I observed, the more patterns became clear. She always chose the same people as her allies, people who would unquestioningly back her story without seeing the truth. She had routines, predictable ways of controlling the room, ways of subtly shifting attention onto herself. And for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of power. The quiet, overlooked Emma that everyone thought was too soft, too polite, too naive to challenge the system was quietly learning the rules Clara had been exploiting for years. I realized that if I wanted justice, I couldn't just react emotionally, I had to outsmart her. I had to plan meticulously. My plan began with small victories, testing the waters without revealing my strategy. I started volunteering for tasks that I knew she would underestimate, ones she assumed were beneath her attention. I completed them flawlessly, not announcing my achievements, just letting the results speak for themselves. Slowly, I began regaining credibility with our manager and colleagues, subtly shifting perceptions without triggering Clara's suspicion. I also began sowing seeds of doubt without being obvious. I asked carefully worded questions in meetings, gently pointing out inconsistencies in reports she claimed were hers, but in a neutral, almost casual tone. People started noticing, whispering among themselves but never aloud. The feeling of control I got from these small maneuvers was intoxicating. I watched Clara's confidence begin to waver, imperceptibly at first. She laughed and smiled, but the micro-expressions, the brief flickers of irritation, told a different story. I knew then that the underestimated one had become a silent threat, and she had no idea. At home, I spent hours reflecting on every detail. Every slight, every insult, every stolen credit fueled a plan that was precise and patient. I wasn't looking for a moment of explosive revenge. I was building a foundation that would ensure the outcome was complete and undeniable. I started timing my actions, learning her schedule, noting how she relied on others for support, and how she reacted when caught off guard. I realized that she had left herself vulnerable in predictable ways, relying on routine, and her allies' unquestioning loyalty. I started testing small boundaries, inserting subtle truths in conversations that contradicted her claims, allowing others to see glimpses of reality without making it obvious. Slowly, people began to question inconsistencies, but Clara still remained unaware of the full extent of what I was doing. This slow burn was crucial because it gave me leverage I couldn't have gained through confrontation. I realized that patience and observation were more powerful than immediate retaliation. And as I executed these small maneuvers, a thought kept repeating in my mind: they underestimated me. All this time, everyone thought I was fragile, naive, and easy to manipulate, but in reality, I was learning, growing, and quietly gathering the tools I would need to change everything. The slow accumulation of evidence, the quiet demonstration of my competence, the subtle erosion of her influence, each step was a calculated move in a game she didn't even know existed. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a sense of control and anticipation, a dangerous excitement that the final act was not just coming, it was inevitable. Clara had built her empire on deception and manipulation, but I had started to see the cracks, the weaknesses she never considered. Every action she took against me became material for my plan, and every person she misled became a potential witness to the truth I was assembling. I didn't speak about it to anyone. I didn't brag. I just continued, quiet and methodical, letting my competence shine subtly, letting her arrogance blind her, letting the tension build like a storm she couldn't predict. And all the while, in the back of my mind, I smiled at the inevitability of it. One day she would realize that the girl she dismissed, mocked, and undermined was no longer powerless. One day she would see that patience, observation, and intelligence could be more lethal than malice or impulsive anger. And in that realization, I found satisfaction, a dangerous, thrilling satisfaction that made every moment of planning feel like a victory. By the end of that month, it was no longer a question of if revenge would come, but how devastating it would be. I had become the silent architect of her downfall, the quiet force no one had anticipated, and the thought of Clara finally facing the consequences of her actions sent a shiver of anticipation through me. And I knew with certainty that the next steps I took would change everything, and that the underestimated one had finally become the unstoppable one. The moment everything changed didn't come with shouting or dramatic confrontations. It came quietly, exactly the way I had planned it. By the time Clara realized something was wrong, the damage was already irreversible. It started with the quarterly performance review meeting, the one everyone dreaded and prepared weeks for. I knew Clara had been counting on it as her next big moment, another opportunity to showcase her achievements and tighten her grip on the team. What she didn't know was that every project she planned to present had already been documented, traced, and quietly cross-verified. I had submitted my own performance report early, attaching email trails, draft timestamps, version histories, and internal feedback that clearly showed my ownership of the work she had claimed. I didn't accuse her directly. I didn't even mention her name. I simply presented facts. Clean, chronological, undeniable facts. When the meeting began, Clara walked in confident as ever, smiling, relaxed, already convinced she had won. The manager started reviewing reports, and as my work came up, something shifted. Questions were asked. Specific questions. Questions Clara wasn't prepared for. When she tried to step in and answer, she stumbled, contradicting details she should have known if the work was truly hers. I stayed quiet. I let the evidence speak. Then came the moment I'll never forget. The manager pulled up the project timeline on the screen, showing document histories, contributor logs, and internal approvals. My name appeared again and again. Clara's appeared late, inconsistently, usually right before submissions. The room went silent. For the first time since I'd met her, Clara looked unsure. She tried to laugh it off, claiming collaboration, but the tone had changed. Collaboration didn't explain why credit had been redirected, why emails showed her removing my name, why drafts showed her copying content hours before deadlines. One by one, the lies unraveled. No yelling. No accusations. Just clarity. And clarity is devastating when someone has built their power on confusion. After the meeting, HR got involved. Not because I demanded it, but because management couldn't ignore what was now visible. An internal review was launched. I was asked to provide everything I had documented. I did, calmly, professionally, without emotion. Clara was asked to do the same. She couldn't. The allies she once relied on started distancing themselves, unwilling to defend something that was clearly indefensible. Within days, the office atmosphere shifted completely. People avoided eye contact with her. Conversations stopped when she entered the room. The confidence she wore like armor cracked under the weight of exposure. Eventually, the decision was made. Clara was removed from all leadership responsibilities pending investigation. Her projects were reassigned. Her authority vanished almost overnight. There was no dramatic firing scene, no public humiliation, but the consequences were real and permanent. She had lost trust, credibility, and influence, the very things she had spent years manipulating others to gain. As for me, I was called into a separate meeting. I expected questions, maybe even skepticism. Instead, I was thanked. Not just for my work but for my professionalism. For how I handled everything without creating chaos. I was given a formal acknowledgement for the projects I had led and shortly after that a promotion. Not because I demanded it, not because I sought revenge, but because the truth had finally been seen. The satisfaction I felt wasn't loud or explosive. It was quiet, steady, and deeply fulfilling. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel triumphant in a cruel way. I felt balanced. For months, I had been made to feel small, invisible, replaceable. Now I felt grounded. Seen. Respected. Clara avoided me after that. When we did cross paths, she couldn't look me in the eye. The power dynamic had completely reversed, not because I attacked her, but because I outgrew her. I realized then that the best revenge isn't destruction, it's exposure. It's letting someone's own actions catch up with them while you stand firmly on the right side of the truth. I never raised my voice. I never spread rumors. I never broke rules. I simply stopped allowing myself to be erased. And that was enough. Watching someone face the consequences of their manipulation without you having to become like them is a satisfaction that's hard to describe. It doesn't feel like anger anymore. It feels like closure. And as I walked out of the office that evening, promotion letter in my bag and my conscience clean, I knew something had fundamentally changed. Not just for Clara but for me. I was no longer the quiet girl who stayed silent to keep the peace. I was someone who understood her worth and protected it without apology. And that realization made every moment of waiting, planning, and restraint completely worth it. After everything had unfolded, life didn't suddenly become dramatic or cinematic. There were no celebratory scenes, no public applause, just quiet mornings where I finally felt like I could breathe, without the weight of constant manipulation pressing down on me. The office atmosphere had changed completely. People treated me with respect, colleagues sought my input, and I finally felt the satisfaction of being recognized for the work I had genuinely done. Clara kept her distance, which was fine by me. I realized that the power she once held over me wasn't gone because of anger or aggression, it was gone because I refused to let her define my worth anymore. I felt a strange mixture of relief and pride. Relief because I no longer had to tiptoe around someone whose only joy came from seeing me falter, and pride because I had handled everything on my terms, without compromising my integrity. I began reflecting on the months of frustration, humiliation, and careful planning, and a deeper lesson became clear: revenge isn't about causing pain for the sake of it. It's about reclaiming your power, about standing on your own ground, about letting truth and patience do the work that impulsive rage cannot. I also realized that the experience had changed me in ways I hadn't anticipated. I became more aware of people's motives, more confident in my skills, and more cautious about who I trusted. I didn't become cynical or cruel, instead, I became deliberate, patient, and observant. I learned that the quiet ones, the ones who seem naive or powerless, often have the greatest strength when pushed too far. I never sought to humiliate Clara in front of everyone, I didn't spread rumors, and I didn't lose my moral footing. The satisfaction I felt was different. It wasn't about proving her wrong in a dramatic showdown, it was about knowing I had protected my career, my reputation, and my peace of mind while still doing the right thing. There were moments when I wondered if it was worth all the sleepless nights, all the careful planning, all the effort spent watching, documenting, and strategizing. And every time, the answer was yes. Because through the process, I discovered a version of myself I hadn't known existed, a version that is patient, resourceful, and unshakable. I also realized that letting someone like Clara operate unchecked would have only allowed her to hurt more people. By standing my ground, documenting every misstep, and taking intelligent, calculated action, I not only reclaimed my own power but prevented future manipulation that could have affected others. And that, in its own way, feels like a victory far greater than any single promotion or recognition. As I sit here reflecting on it all, I want anyone listening to understand something important: you don't have to be loud to be strong. You don't have to retaliate with malice to achieve justice. Patience, observation, preparation, and integrity often create the most powerful outcomes. Sometimes the quietest, calmest, and most underestimated people are the ones who can create the most profound change. And that's exactly what happened to me. If you've ever felt underestimated, overlooked, or unfairly treated, remember that the right strategy, persistence, and moral clarity can shift the balance in ways you might never expect. So for anyone watching this story, if you think my approach made sense, if you felt the tension, the planning, and finally the payoff was worth it, hit like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. Share your thoughts or your own experiences with manipulation and revenge, because some stories deserve to be heard, and some lessons deserve to be remembered. And above all, remember this: your patience, your intelligence, and your integrity are your greatest tools. Never let anyone take them from you.